Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Welcome back to Crosstabs, everybody. Last week we were without Bryan Iverson. This week, not only do we add Bryan Iverson, but we add a new and hopefully regular guest, Ashley Kuenzi she works at the Senate Republican office as a communications director. She's also an excellent writer, a political campaign and Republican operative with a lot of experience in key races. So we're happy to add Ashley to the program to really balance out mostly Bryan, but a little bit me too, I think. Is
Two
why you're
against
here,
one. It's
Ashley.
not fair.
Well, thanks for having me. I always say that I don't have a voice for radio, which also means I don't have a voice for podcasting. So I'm honored that you asked me to be here. I was a little surprised and pleasantly at that.
If you were around the 2023 legislative session, especially the walkout, I think the most important thing you need to know is that Ashley created the red follow the law graphic that became the mantra of the entire walkout and negotiation and all of that. And Bryan's talked about this before a little bit on how we won the messaging war on that. I think that was in one of our early episodes, Bryan, on that walkout. We dominated that. And Ashley, you were really key and important in getting that done. Your ability to snap back, even in the small club that is Orpole Twitter. We know that there were the mugs were full of liberal tears at your work. And so tremendous to have you on here. And we just thought, you write the daily clips. So you guys have a lot of subscribers to the daily clips that you send out from the Senate Republican office. So you're really heavily, obviously, for your job. And, I don't know if you were sad enough like me to follow all these links before it was your job to do it, like me and Bryan. But you have a heart. You have the heartbeat. You got the pulse is what I'm looking for, not the heartbeat, the pulse of the news. And so, I'm going to give credit to Bryan on this one for making a suggestion
Reagan.
on doing
It's
this.
enough already. I mean, it's not like she's won a presidential race or anything yet. I mean, it's good.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Well, speaking of presidential race, I of course want to get to state and local politics, but since you mentioned the presidential race, there was a poll out this morning that Trump has a very slight lead over Harris. Curious your guys' thoughts on that. Obviously, we all know that the debate is coming up tomorrow evening. What are your comments?
Which poll is that, Ashley? I need to look at that poll.
It was
Well,
a CNN
Bryan's
one, right? That you're referring to. Well, I guess when they congregate the polls, right? They basically gave him a little bit of an edge. My take on the national stuff is really, I think we've seen, or I hope we've seen, I should say, as a Republican, we've kind of maybe seen a peak of the rise in the Harris polls, through going through everything. And now the dogfight begins, right? So we kind of saw Trump peak probably, obviously, when he trounced the heck out of Biden, and then, and then then he got shot at and almost killed. And then, of course, everybody likes to forget that one. And then moving into the Harris stuff, which really did overtake the news in August. And then I think now what we're starting to see is substance meets the road. And tomorrow night is what Tuesday night, we're recording on Monday. Reagan promises to get this thing turned around and out the door fast. So we'll make that assumption with our producer. But I'm really looking forward to the first presidential debate. I hope it's not the last, because I think you need to see two good presidential debates to really get a sense of how people go against each other. But I really do believe this is kind of a peak, and now this is going to be a turnout dogfight to the finish.
Do you think former Vice President Dick Cheney's recent endorsement of Harris is going to sway a single voter ever.
I thought he was dead.
Okay. I was ranting with a friend about this the other day. I said, okay, great. Two things about that. One, as a political person who understands how you operate at a level, like I don't know the federal level, but I can assume it's similar to the legislative level in the sense that if, let's say, you're Liz Cheney, a congresswoman who voted to impeach the president, he may have strong feelings in opposition to you, recruit a candidate, a Republican primary challenger that she got defeated in the primary. They can say, oh, he's a threat to democracy and all this stuff. Sure. The sort of the talking points of the kind of folks that they want to, buy their books and idolize them and get their MSNBC contracts. But I honestly think that's just political revenge. They're trying to beat him because he beat them, right? And so it's like that's how I read that. I don't necessarily read it as, Dick Cheney, which, by the way, I just want to point this out. Despite him endorsing Harris, everybody should watch Vice because it is a movie that was attempting to make Dick Cheney a villain. And if you watch that movie and you're not a far left wing nut, you'll love Dick Cheney even more. But also that gets to my second point, which is while he was vice president and prior to that, and even most of the Obama years, the left basically thought Dick Cheney was a war criminal, and now he's a patriotic hero. So that's sort of where I'm struggling to see the consistency in the position there. They're really heralding this as a incredible bipartisan moment. Could be. I don't think it'll have a lot of effect because just like Mitt Romney before, they trashed him when he was running for president, and now they glorify him when he stands up to Trump. When really, I think it's true that if they hadn't have lied about Romney as much as they did, lied about George W. Bush, lied about Dick Cheney, that part of the Republican Party would still be strong and existing. But because they vilified them as complete villains, the voters basically said, okay, you want somebody who's, legitimately going to flip tables upside down, you get Donald Trump. That's kind of how I mean, that's how I see that. And so you could argue Democrats are more responsible for Trump than even the Republicans are in some ways.
All right, moving on. Next story.
Okay, since we're talking about elections now, I want to talk about the Measure 118 campaign. I just saw on Willamette Week a few days ago that Measure 118 campaign reels in its first large contribution, and shocker, from a San Francisco candidate for mayor, $10,000. What do you think?
On the 118 stuff, and I'm kind of glad you brought this thing up because I don't think they need as much money to pass that one versus what the no guys need to defeat it. So I think that's the reality is how much the question has to be asked is how much money do you need to push out there in the ether? Because you got to assume they probably already got a 35-40% yes vote, right? So they got there's a built-in anti-corporation kind of mentality kind of out there. I don't know what the real number is, probably somewhere in the 30s, I would guess. So they're going to vote yes no matter what. So I think if they are able to raise $1 million or so, I mean, geez, I feel like, because I think the no side's only raised about $6 million. Is that about right? I think 6.
I'll go look while you're talking.
Yeah, I think somewhere around there. So I think that's a tough. That edge goes to the yes side. If that's all that we have is 1 million versus 6 million, if we end up, I think they need to be more like almost a 12-to-1 ratio versus a 6-to-1 ratio in my mind.
Yeah, and I'd say that's probably No's goal. They're trying to replicate No on 97, and that was a campaign where they just spent an enormous amount of money to make sure that thing got beat pretty badly. But I will say I agree with you, Bryan. They don't need as much to promote the yes side. I mean, it's people are going to look for solutions to inflation, and I don't think most people have an economics degree. They're not going to realize that a $1,600 rebate from higher taxes could impact state budgets and have all these negative consequences for businesses. So I think that's why the No campaign got on it as soon as that thing got qualified, because they know that they've got their work cut out for them to beat it. But I think they can, because we beat 97.
I would agree. Yeah, I think there's some opportunity to beat it. But if you get some of those little lefty San Francisco, New Yorkers, I mean, if Bloomberg comes in and drops a mill on it, or Soros, or one of those DSA guys, I mean, we could see, some things change. I don't think this is really in Bloomberg's wheelhouse, but definitely in a Soros wheelhouse, for sure. I think that would make things very, very difficult for us.
I would enjoy left-wing Democrats who control Salem getting their budget destroyed by further left-wing Democrats from California.
Right. Have we?
Well,
do we have confirmation? Has Travis Nelson come out against this, or is he for it? And we're still waiting. I'm waiting for one of the reporters to do. Dirk, if you're listening, and I know you listen to the podcast because I heard you reference Richard Burke interview on OPB's podcast the other day. So thanks for listening. I think we need a rundown. Who's for and who's against Measure 118?
Yeah, I'd love to get, the Dan Rayfields, the people like him who are running for a higher statewide office, where they're at on this. And I think it's easy for them to kind of avoid it.
Good idea.
I think I remember, hold on, I'm going to go to No on Measure 118 website because I heard that they were putting together a endorsement list that included a lot of legislators. So let's see.
I think that's
and it was both parties. Okay, elected officials. So they've got a lot, and I'm not quite sure how they're sorted. So I'm just going to try to Command F and search this for.
We'll do. We can do.
Can't find Travis Nelson on there. I don't know.
We could do let's do that next time we have Ashley on. Ashley, let's do a report on who's come out, or if anybody really, if they're, because they really have to come out if they're a no, and if there's definitely a website being circulated, or if anybody comes out as a yes. I don't know what groups are coming out as yes, but that'd be a good one for this one to keep kind of the story percolating.
Ryan, who are the swing Democrats that all got really close to being beaten last time?
Let's see. Emerson Levy, Lively.
Levy is no on 118.
Hartman.
Lively is no on 118. No Hartman. Ruiz is no on 118.
Where's Gorsuch?
No on 118.
Smart.
Huawin isn't on the list.
Oh, no Huawin, huh? That would be interesting. One there.
Can't find Confam either. I'm not. High Fam is no on 118, but I can't find Confam, Jeff Golden. So I mean, this is how you would be able to tell kind of. This is a really good indicator of who the real lefties are. Where even when it's going to blow a giant hole in the state budget, they still can't align themselves with business on 118.
Is Representative Hudson on there? I bet he's not.
Oh, Hudson's on there.
Wow.
Some of these,
Wow.
some of these guys know what's good for them.
Yeah.
Some of these guys know what's good for them.
Golden apparently doesn't.
No.
I don't think Golden just doesn't care. Like, I don't even know if he'd respond if you went down and asked him. I think he'd just be like, ah.
I think he's not running again. That's what I think. So then he doesn't have to care.
Yeah,
all right. What's next, Ashley?
Well, I was going to say, speaking of the state budget, what won't make a significant difference is no tax on tips. So as some of the listeners may already know, Senator Dick Anderson of Lincoln City officially announced that he is going to be introducing a no tax on tips bill for the 25 session. And we've already heard of bipartisan support, and it had picked up a lot of news traction in the last couple of weeks. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts on the possibility that it will get somewhere as a Republican bill in 25.
Just as with Kamala Harris, it will not be a Republican bill in the legislature. It will get, my prediction, it will be co-opted by Democrats, become a Democrat bill that has high-profile Republican sponsors. That's what I think will happen, or at least they will attempt. Sure. You tell me I'm wrong, Brian.
No, you're. I think that didn't this. Oh, yeah, that's right. $100 cash tip, or the $100 cash limit, right? When Senator Cano put that in, and they threw it away, and then they came back with their own one. Yeah, I think that'll happen. Hey, listen, here's the thing. I mean, even Senator Anderson said this. I believe on Your Voice, Your Vote. He just said if it's a good idea, who cares if it's a Republican or Democrat? I think at the end of the day, or whether it was Trump or Harris, and I think seeing Harris kind of grab Trump's thing means at the end of the day, it's a good bill. And what I love about the tip thing is the feedback has been really good for the senator on this one, but also from both people on the aisle. Is the reality is a tip really isn't income. A tip is like a gift. It's like saying thank you for doing a great job going above and beyond your minimum wage salary that you're probably making serving food, but just making my meal just a little bit better, making my beers with my buddies just a little bit better. And that's what it was before, and it shouldn't be tipped. And then this group of people is the people we need to support with the inflation and the housing and all the food prices and all the things. These are the people that have second jobs, or maybe they have young kids and they get to do the switcheroo. I mean, Reagan, you're in a 2-income family with you and your wife and your young kids, and if you guys needed to save a little extra, she could come home from work, and then you have to go be a bartender at the bar down there. It'd be nice because at that point, that's probably extra money that you would have to be taxed on.
Yep.
With your income. And so it does make a difference, man. $200 a month makes a huge difference to somebody versus paying taxes on it.
I'll also tell you why I just came to this realization as you guys were talking. Not only is this pro-working class policy, which it is, and I think that's why it's really popular, but I really think the reason when Trump was running in 2016, he talked about how the system is rigged for the rich and powerful, and the reason he knows that is because he's rich and powerful. It was sort of like a really clever, like, lifting himself up of how great he is. But as part of that, this is a change to the tax code that wouldn't benefit the rich and powerful whatsoever. That, the Bill Gates has zero tip income. Okay. He gets zero income from tips. So this is a change to the tax code that the wealthy can't exploit. And I think that's one of the things that actually makes it incredible political rocket fuel, and why, even though it could cause a loss in some money going into the federal government, that's why Democrats hopped on board, because not only is it a good policy that a lot of people are going to like, it plays into something that, Washington, D.C. actually helping working people with the tax code instead of constantly screwing them. Because a lot of people felt screwed. I talked to a lot of people this year and last year who felt like their taxes had gone up, that they got a rebate, and now they didn't get a rebate. And so their view of the government right now is that they're raising taxes on working people. And so this really is one of those things that a rich person doesn't benefit from whatsoever.
I couldn't agree. I think you were so right on when Trump came out and just said, because they were kind of attacking him for being this rich and powerful guy, and he's like, well, of course, because I'm going to use it's your tax code, it's the government's tax code. I'm going to use everything I possibly can, including bankruptcy. He's used as a tool to just get richer. And I don't think people realize that those tools are accessible, but unless you have enough people around you that know what you're doing, and CPAs and all. I mean, I have a CPA, and I feel like, and I'm no rich person, let me tell you. I mean, but man, oh man, I couldn't do my taxes without my CPA. I'd be paying tons of taxes, it's crazy. So this is just a very simple fix to something that isn't going to make a big deal in the grand scheme of a budget anyway. So unlike Measure 118, which it's easy to tax those corporations and those people that pay jobs, and those guys are all paying income taxes on those jobs. And this is a gift for somebody that does a job well done.
All right, Ashley, where are we headed next?
Yes. So end of August was the quarterly revenue forecast. We know that the kicker has grown to almost $1 billion. The trend over the last, several biennium has been that we have more money than we've ever had. We're taking in more money than we ever had. However, economists are worried about the future. And then you throw into the mix that we have a new state economist coming in, Carl Riccadonna, I believe is how you say his name. All of those different pieces. What do you guys think the landscape is as of right now? What are your thoughts?
Well, that sounds like a hard question that Bryan should answer.
Yeah. Well, one, Riccadonna, it's kind of a cool name. I like that. Bringing in an Italian from New York, right? I mean, that's somebody from Wall Street. Hey, props to, I don't, does the governor hire that person? Is that a governor hire? Ashley, do you know?
It's a combination of her and Barry Leslie from DAS, right? Because
Okay.
DAS was the one.
Makes sense.
DAS released the
Barry works
press
for the
release.
governor, so yeah, I would guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. I mean, on paper, it looks like a pretty cool hire. I don't know why somebody'd want to leave a Wall Street job as a chief economist to come to Oregon to be a chief economist. I mean, PERS must be really good, but I don't know. I look at my PERS and it ain't nothing. I'm no tier one PERS. I got the crappy PERS, which I think is horrible. But I think, they probably came in with the mentality of, hey, we really want to come hit the street and do things right. I don't know if we'll see that $1 billion disappear by the March forecast for the kicker, but I do think that it's good to see that Oregon is on par with our jobs, and the economy seems to be fairly stable, which is really good for us going forward. And we do generate a ton of revenue. I mean, the state of Oregon, because of our income tax, generates a ton of revenue. And I think that, knowing that Democrats love to spend money, we're going to see some interesting stuff, I think, in the long session. Republicans need to keep pushing the mantra of don't always just spend what you got, but it's hard to beat that drum in a state that basically spends what it has. So thank God for the kicker for returning some of that money, because we can't normally, you guys know, actually Reagan probably knows this way more, he's a Ways and Means guy, but because we can't borrow money on the state of Oregon. We can bond certain things, but we can't really borrow money like the federal government does. Right, Reagan?
No, you can't run. So the state constitution, and pretty much every state constitution is like this. You have to balance your budget at the end of the budget has to be balanced. And anything like an economic downturn, I think in 2001, after 9/11, the legislature had like 5 or 6 special sessions to balance the budget. That's how bad things got out of whack at that particular time. It was similar in the with the '08 recession, right? The housing market crash. So your budget has to balance and remain balanced. And one of the things about the economist and the revenue too is that kicker projections they're based on how much money you're coming in. If you overshoot your projection, if in essence, to eliminate the kicker, you could just project way more income than you're expecting. However, that's going to put you in a budget deficit because they like to spend all that money. And so then you have to come back and cut later. So what's been happening is that the unions have been accusing the state economists of undershooting too much to create kickers intentionally. They're not doing that. That would be like a lawyer intentionally violating the law, which they're not allowed to do, right? Economist isn't going to do that. They're going to use the best data they have available, but projecting out 2 years is hard. And so we had a really big kicker, and there were a couple things that contributed to that the Democrats still haven't figured out is causing problems, and they're really self-inflicted wounds, which I'm not going to disclose to them now. They're going to have to figure out those budgets on their own. But the flip side of this is that, and I text my dad this. I said, hey, you should probably reach out and say hi to the new state economist, because in a couple of months he's going to be cursing your name for having to do these dang kicker projections. So I hope they do a good job. I don't necessarily hope for extra kickers, but the kicker's there and continues to limit the size and scope of government. It saved like $20 billion since it went in the Constitution. So our budget would be $20 billion larger right now. And Democrats say they'd be able to fix problems with that money. I say they'd just be creating more.
I think, well, and Reagan, if you look at, what was it, like Minnesota, I was, kind of following some of that, especially with Tim Walz and all the stuff that happened there. And they had a huge budget surplus and they have no kicker, right? So they came with billions of dollars and they threw it in all these programs because they just spent it, right? They just like, oh, now I can stand up that program that I wanted to do ever. That's for, children that love wildflowers, project, whatever, right? Whatever crazy project that a legislator in Minnesota wants to do. And then it led to the largest fraud case in America, where the Somalis were basically doing this feed the children, where they stole billion from the state government. They're literally just making up people's names and just saying they're feeding these people, and they were just stealing money, which they still haven't arrested anybody for. But so the budget forces, or sorry, the kicker forces an economist to probably undershoot the budget, right? I mean, because it makes it even worse if they go into a deficit. So It's a lot easier to try to do it under, which, and then occasionally when you have these blips that we had, right, with the largest kicker before, it will create some of those every now and again. But at the end of the day, coming in with close to $1 billion is probably not a bad projection for 2 years. That's hard to do.
It really isn't, because our whole budget, I mean, not talking about all funds, I think the whole budget for general funds like $30 billion. So to send $1 billion back to taxpayers, yeah, it's a chunk of change that you could spend it on, but there's not a lot you can do with like a single $1 billion that's going to have a dramatic impact on people's lives more than them getting that money back. And I mean, back to the tax code thing, it'd be nice if we turn it back into a check, because people who aren't very good or struggle to file their taxes, they're more likely to be people, who don't even have access to funds for a CPA, or their kicker is just going to be the same as the cost of a CPA. Everybody knows how to cash or deposit a check, and that's why that's a better system than this silly tax credit garbage. And unfortunately, we have Republicans to thank for, a few Republicans who deserted us to thank for that change, unfortunately. So hindsight's 2020. I think they would realize that was a mistake today.
Well, one of my favorite longtime Capitol reporters, Dick Hughes, noted that Riccadonna, I just love saying his name, he had posted on his social media, "I've traded the canyons of Wall Street for the Columbia River Gorge. New coast, new career opportunity. Those who know me well know that I've got some very special connections to the state." But beyond that, isn't really willing to answer questions quite yet. Granted, his first day, I believe, is today. So the next several months will be, I think, really interesting, and many of us will be tuning into how he grows into the role. And
we put out any press releases on his first day, we should blow him up.
We welcome him with open arms, as long as you respect the kicker.
I think of all of those, the worst loss is Josh Lerner leaving, I think, is really where, I don't know Riccadonna at all. I hopefully get to know him, but losing Josh, I've gotten to know Josh over the years, and I think that he was a good asset to the state of Oregon, and it does suck to lose people like that. That's for sure.
And he's very responsive on Twitter. I mean, we would ask questions and give him suggestions, and he'd post data points and stuff like that. Yeah. It was all really good, and he was one of those fantastic professionals you love working with.
So September 1st, drugs were recriminalized in the state of Oregon. It's official. Of course, this is a statewide impact, but many of us are tuning into what Multnomah County is doing. A few headlines over the last few days. So number one, it sounds like Portland is set to open a new recovery housing facility in October 2024. It is called 4D Recovery, a nonprofit that will start accepting people who are in treatment and need a support system to live on their own. They just had their grand opening on Friday. Meanwhile, Serena Cruz resigns as Multnomah County COO, creating a new vacancy in the county's leadership. And then another headline, I believe a few days ago, said, Portland business owner says he sees, quote, no changes after new drug law. Multnomah County announced that sounds like they've essentially found help for 8 people. Of course, this is the new law, but the headlines have been interesting. Eight people.
8. Oh, great.
I think that's more than we helped under all of Measure 110.
That's how many people called the hotline.
That's what I thought. I was going to say. I think it's too early. I would say anybody trying to see if in the first week it's going to work. I would, even if I'm going to be a critic of the law, I would wait longer than that. I mean, a week's not very long.
Absolutely.
I will say I was doing some Googling because we talked about Clackamas not getting funding for a deflection center. They have a press release up on the Clackamas website saying they launched a deflection program September 1st. So I don't know if they got state funding after publicly
I believe they
shaming
did.
them, but which is good. I mean, I think that's what should have happened. And I think probably the reason, my best guess, is Clackamas actually wanted to have some accountability in their deflection program, and the state was trying to shame them out of doing that. And so if they stood strong on that, good for them. But I think overall, the real problem is we still don't have defense lawyers for these guys, and that is going to continue to hamper this effort. And it seems like the bill that we passed now almost 2 years ago has not had an impact on the defense crisis. I think that's going to be a problem. I think that if we don't have jail capacity for the people who actually need to be put in jail after they fail their deflections, that will be another challenge of this law. There needs to be, because all Democrats do is try to close prisons and put people back on the streets. And so we need to make sure that there's appropriate capacity and funding for that so that people can get clean.
Well, it's hard to disagree with what you just said, Reagan. I think you're hitting the underlying stuff, but I believe this is going to be a very rocky next 6 months that we're going to see Measure 110 and the re-emerging of trying to, because some people just, like the drug user, like the end user that has a problem living on the streets. I don't even think they know what day it is, let alone what date it is, and let alone, that, oh, now all of a sudden I have to go and do a different program. And I've heard some other people talking about, well, what if one county had, and you alluded this with Clackamas, and this is going to be the interesting thing, is Clackamas County, well, they do have a diversion program, but what if you're go out to my neck of the woods? Deschutes County has one, but Crook County doesn't. So you tell me that drug users are going to choose to go over this county line to that county line? I don't know. I just think we've seen the beginning of a very rocky road ahead for Oregon, which all began when we first passed Measure 110 in the first place. I'm still stand by the fact that it was the right thing to do, was to recriminalize the hard drugs. But now we have to do the hard work, the heavy lifting. I think that I'm still in favor of that San Francisco thing that did that. Was it called Project Journey Home? It's bus tickets, right, Reagan? That's what it was like, what, if you're not from Oregon and you just came here on a drug tourism thing and now you're homeless and strung out on fentanyl, like, we find out where you came from and we need to just send you back there. And then focus on the pipeline, getting people off the streets. But we gotta get the drugs, we gotta get the pipeline figured out. If we don't figure that part out, it doesn't even matter.
And I think here's the other thing too. If this doesn't work, I think what the far left will try to do is claim that recriminalizing doesn't help. And I think what is always possible is that we didn't go far enough. And so there actually be the willpower to step it up some more and actually do what needs to be done, right? Because I think you want to start. I think the reason it was right for Republicans to back this is it was starting you down the correct path of going back. But we didn't go all the way back. We did a half step. So if it starts to work, but it doesn't finish the job, is there going to be the willpower to finish the job? And that's where I really wonder if the Democrats can even get enough votes to get that handled, or rather, to satiate the far left, will their leadership not allow those votes to cross over with Republicans to finish the job? And that's the thing, really, is I think that if the leadership on the Democratic side were more hands off and they let members work together on this stuff, and we said, okay, it's time, let's sideline both party leaders, the Republican and the Democrat, and let the members work together on what can get enough votes, what can get 31 votes in the House, what can get 16 votes in the Senate. This would be a very different state. We wouldn't have the really the big partisan fights that you see now. I think I argue that those are driven by Democrats, because Republicans, here's the difference. Republicans didn't have a voter registration advantage when they were in charge. So if enough of their members felt like they wanted to back a Democratic proposal, that thing was eventually going to hit the floor, because those members needed to win re-election or they were going to lose. And Republicans couldn't fall back on the fact that it was a red state. We weren't a red state back then. We were still a blue to purple state. So they had, I think, more respect for the bipartisanship than a lot of the Democrat leaders do now, because they can always fall back on, we'll still have 31 and 16 no matter what happens because we're so blue and we've gerrymandered the state. Yeah.
Wow.
End rant.
Well, and I think we also have to, I mean, let's be real here. I think if we don't stop the supply coming in from the southern border, how much of a difference are we really going
Look
to
at
see
you.
here?
Staying on message.
And I hate to tie it to the border, but I mean, that's just the reality that we face.
Yeah,
If
it's real.
the supply isn't going to change, then, local law enforcement can do as much as they want. And in counties like, Marion County, who have been working on essentially a deflection program long before the legislature came forward with 4002, they're potentially well equipped to see some changes, but I fear that it's going to be minimal as long as we don't see some change on that front.
So all borders need to be guarded, and that includes the borders of Oregon as well. So, because obviously we can't control what happens in the Mexico border coming into America. There's the Canadian border is horrible. Our ports are horrible. I mean, like, we have got a very porous America, but if we have a stronger Oregon, we can get there, and we got to give, our law enforcement the tools they need to, stop the drug trafficking, and just say that Oregon is off limits. Like, I don't see these people, making a way into Idaho and Montana. I'm sure there's drugs there, but not at the level in which it's coming into Oregon. And I think you can't stop it all. I mean, we can't turn it off like you turn it off a faucet and then you just stop the drugs from coming in, but you have to try and you have to go somewhere. And I think to Reagan's point that he brought up earlier about the having, attorneys for these people, defense attorneys, even if we gave the extra $1 billion to defense attorneys, I don't even know if they're out there to hire. I don't know if they even exist. So I know the DAs have the same problem, just having DAs. I mean, we have counties in the state of Oregon, that don't have a DA. Like the Justice Department, the federal Justice Department is running cover because they can't get a district attorney on the ballot to even win in like Lake County or something, because nobody wants to go live in Lakeview and prosecute cases. So, it is an issue, and it's one of those things that, like in all industries, I guess, there's a shortage of workers, but yet our unemployment rate is 4.2%. You go figure it out. I don't know.
That's a compensation problem, Brian. I will tell you, there is no shortage of lawyers in private practice who, if compensation were even somewhat competitive, would be available to be DAs, to be judges. I guarantee you that, and defense attorneys too, that is a compensation problem. It's just that a lot of that work is harder than private practice. It's harder than corporate lawyer work. It's harder than trust, wills, and estates, and it doesn't pay as well. If it was more competitive on pay, I think there would be plenty of available lawyers for that. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
I mean, you're married to a lawyer. You should know. I mean, you know better.
She could be making. She works at Department of Justice, and she could be making more in private practice. But there are some benefits to Department of Justice.
Yeah,
pretty reasonable normal hours. You're not working crazy hours to hit. She has billables, but they're reasonable billables that she has to hit. And then the benefits are pretty good. And so I would say those are the things that outweigh. But the pay is not even. It's not competitive. It really isn't.
Well, I'm all for paying for people's right to have a public defender. I think that is what sets our system of justice better than most other countries that are out there in the world, is that you should have the right to an attorney. And especially in a world in which it's so complicated out there. I mean, we were just talking about tax structure earlier and having a CPA, right? But you're talking about taking somebody's freedom away. And I think there's a difference there between me having to pay a little more in taxes because I'm too big of an idiot to figure out the tax code versus me getting locked up. So I think there is a difference between the two, and I would be in favor of, I don't know if I really want them all to be public employees, I think was one of the ideas for public defenders. I'm not sure that really helps our cause at the end of the day, but you gotta go somewhere, and if that's what it takes, I guess that's what it takes.
Well, and don't forget like you said though, these prosecutors too, they represent the people too. When it's the people versus the person who did the crime, right? The people also have a right to representation to protect them from crime. So I understand and have harped on this defense crisis before and totally understand it. But the fact that we don't competitively pay and fund DA's offices is also a problem that needs to be solved.
Sounds like a bill.
Well, Ashley, we really thank you for joining us. This is where we say goodbye to you, but not forever. We're hoping to have you back regularly to take us through the news segments. Your transitions were very good, frustratingly good, in fact. I'm gonna have to get back to work on mine to make them better. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ashley.
Bye.
That was fun. Well,
That was great.
We'll have to get her to learn how to cut us off a little better.
We like to talk and we love the news segments. That's the thing is, Bryan, I think once we get a sponsor, 2 episodes a week, one is news and then one is like a more not timely commentary, honestly, I think. So if you're out there and you want to sponsor a podcast, I promise you our sponsorship isn't that expensive.
Jeez, Reagan, you don't have to. Well, you can sponsor Reagan for cheaper. If you want to sponsor me, it's going to cost you some more. So
that's fair.
I did really, and you're onto it because I did really enjoy your podcast with Justin. I was able to listen to it this morning, and while I was doing the dishes, I told Vicky I'd do the dishes last night, so she didn't have to do them. But she had to get up and get going early this morning. She's been dealing with all the wildfire stuff because we're in the epicenter over here in Crook County. So she's been on the phone with fire marshal all the time and county commissioners and stuff, just trying to make sure they have what they need and just doing what she can to run in the middle. So she was off doing, I think we got to run down to Post tonight she wants me to drive her down there. It's about a half hour away, but they're having a big fire meeting down there and just a lot going on. But anyways, that's where getting into those meaty issues, talking about gambling in Oregon. I mean, Justin Martin, he's just got so much knowledge and, just have that history and that knowledge of what's going on. And it really kind of puts stuff into perspective where he can really kind of take an issue, not necessarily pull the politics all out of it, but really just talk about how did the issue start and where are we now with it? And I think you guys did a really good job of kind of just discussing the issue of gambling in Oregon. And like you guys are talking about, like, it's so pervasive now everywhere that, shit, you can bet on anything. You can bet on whether Trump's going to beat Harris. You can bet on, you can bet on everything out there. I mean, the betting markets it's just gotten insane where, the betting it's crazy.
I appreciate you saying that, Bryan. And I do think I like the opportunity to dive into those topics, which aren't necessarily super timely, but they might pop up at some point here in the 2025 session and beyond. So hopefully we'll get more opportunities to do that and interview really great people. I think we've had some really solid guests. And so I think the chances that we have more good guests are very good.
Yeah. Well, let's do our next segment, huh, Reagan? How about if our rants and raves segment? I have one rant that I kind of want to put out there.
Go for it.
But and then I'll let you do one, and then we'll give you the lay of the land. We won't be here much longer, but we'll do this, and then we want to do our next episode. We're going to get into our election preview. We're really going to dive into the statewides and the congressionals in one podcast, and then we'll get into the legislative in another podcast. And then I don't know if we'll do an election preview on the local stuff, Reagan. I really don't have a whole bunch of local election preview stuff, at least from a preview standpoint. But we're hoping to get those back to back and get those out. We know those are our most popular podcasts when we talk about these actual elections. You and I work on them. We know what's going on in them. I have a lot of data. I have a lot of things. I'm probably going to have to decide what stuff I actually want to put out there and what stuff I need to not, which will be that'll be kind of fun. I don't know. I might say something I don't want to say.
I'll try not to accidentally publish all your campaign plans in the show notes here, Bryan. Right. I'll just make sure I put the right links in there. What's your rant?
I haven't had a chance to really say. Well, I'm gonna bring back an oldie but a goodie, and I'm gonna rant on Kevin Starrett and Oregon Firearms Federation. So he was on Lars Larson a month ago, roughly, when they got somebody, them and our Oregon and firearms policy, they filed a lawsuit against the ghost gun ban that went into effect in Oregon. And then they found somebody in Springfield to file a lawsuit against it. And then, of course, he just goes on and just starts ranting about Oregon House Republicans, and all of a sudden the Senate Republicans get a pass. I don't know how that works. Maybe he just loves my wife enough. I mean, she is pretty cute, so I guess maybe there's something going on there. But I think he just says, well, so the record is straight on this fact. When the House Republicans committed $25,000, it wasn't, there's 25 Republicans, House Republicans. The bill was going to pass. What they wanted to say was, hey, there's nothing we can do about this bill at this point. We gutted it down to basically to match the federal ghost gun ban. And this is what the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans did. It was enough that the Democrats, they wanted anything and everything to do with gun. They wanted something that had to do with gun control, that was going to have to pass. And that's what got through. We believe this one will prevail in the courts, as it's working through the federal courts. That's the whole point of mirroring it as the federal ghost gun ban, because then that way, when that's struck down, this goes away. And so this lawsuit probably follows other lawsuits. I don't even know if it was needed. I believe this was just a move by Kevin Starrett to really get his name out there and try to go people into giving him more money, which isn't going to happen. I think if anybody gives Oregon Firearms Federation any money, is just stupid. And they shouldn't be given a dime, because it does nothing but go to him and his wife. His wife's the treasurer, and he's the president of the organization. We have no idea where the money goes after that. We don't know if they pay any legal fees or anything. So regardless of all that, we know they don't help Republicans win. All they do is attack Republicans. The other thing that about this, though, is that the 25 Republicans all said, hey, we'll give $1,000 each. Now, Vicky she wrote $1,000 check, and we sent it to Oregon, or not Oregon, Firearms Policy Group down in Las Vegas. And she sent it and just said, hey, I said I was going to give $1,000. That's what she told her caucus members. And I think some other ones have sent their checks. I think even Representative Deal said he was going to send $1,000, but he was going to wait till after the campaigns, because he's trying to fund everything he can to campaigns. And I think that's awesome. So however, those 25 Republicans, of course, I don't think Charlie Conrad will probably send $1,000 because he's not coming back. So it might be 24 that are going to send. Whether he does or not, I don't know. Regardless, but the whole point is Kevin Starrett only did all that so he could go on Lars. He could rant about House Republicans and push his agenda to try to somehow get people to give him money, because he's doing this lawsuit. Because he's found that the only way people now give him money is if he sues something or he's part of a lawsuit, like with Measure 114 or this deal. And it's just so shitty and toxic and so backwards towards us trying to move the needle forward in Oregon. I'm just tired of it. I'm just tired of all the BS with it. And it's just time for him to go. It's time for Lars to stop giving him a voice in these other radio shows that just lean into the negative so much, instead of trying to push the positive and trying to push why we can win in Oregon. Anyways, I'm done.
Well, I'd say first, I'm looking at Charlie Conrad's Star here real quick. He got a contribution last month for $300. So not really sure what that's about. That's kind of strange. I'm going to look and see if he needs to pay off. So, yep, he's in some debt there. So about 10 grand. So it'll probably be a little bit before he is. Yeah, that can be rough. So I will say that I think you're right, Bryan, and that's just the way it is. I wouldn't be surprised if the Firearms Policy Coalition isn't even charging the guy to do this. They're funding it out of their own pockets, and then Firearms Federation is going to raise money for themselves and never give it to the Policy Coalition. I would know. Seems very possible. And I think the other thing you bring out there, a lot of the other outside groups, business, pro-life, they engage with and talk to Republican leadership about their strategies around their key issues. And I think that if you had a leader at Oregon Firearms Federation that wanted to engage on those strategies and understand that of the 3 bills that they merged into that one gun bill, we killed the 2 worst ones and positioned the last one to give Democrats their quote unquote gun bill victory, while also knowing that it was likely that if the federal courts strike down, and if the federal courts don't strike down the ghost gun ban, then it's going to be federal law anyway, and the state law doesn't even matter because the federal law is going to supersede it. There will be federal law enforcement that will handle that stuff. Okay. So again, you bring out the strategy, which I think, frankly, was an incredibly successful strategy for Republicans to get everything we wanted, except for the quote unquote victory of killing the bill number. Because again, I mean, you think about the fact that we don't run the state and we were able to get 99% of what we want. Most people would consider that a victory. There's a few out there, including Kevin Starrett, who can't seem to take a win.
It's never enough, Reagan. I mean, I don't know what until what maybe we're in the super duper quorum proof super minority where we're just getting killed at every single turn. Maybe that's probably still not enough, right? We're still, I mean, this litmus test that we have to put on Republican legislators by these groups that are so narrow-minded and so narrow-focused that they don't think the big picture. And the big picture is, majority. At the end of the day, we are in the minority, and in Congress. And I guarantee Hakeem Jeffries, who is in the minority in the Democrat Congress, they have one goal. It's not to pass some legislation or kill some other. It's majority. That's their only goal. And I think that's where we have to be focused on majority. And we can win in Oregon, but we can't win every time somebody's trying to stick a boat anchor around a Republican candidate. It's a horrible way. It's a horrible strategy. And people like Kevin Starrett are just in the way. They're in the way of victory.
Yep. So speaking of people in the way of victory, the Oregonian editorial board. I saw their editorial. Let's see when this was published, but I think it was September 4th, so last week. The perils of a one-party state. And I mean, on the face of it, basically they're talking about this $500,000 donation that was illegally and wrongly attributed to a group called Prime Trust instead of the actual person, which was basically Nishad Singh, who was part of the SBF and FTX. Man, that's a lot of acronyms. Crime ring ? Yeah. Because here's what I think. I think they got the money and they're like, well, we want to spend the $500,000, but we don't want to report it being from a guy who's involved with criminal / activity preying on investors. So they were like, let's just lie about where it came from. Okay. Now, weirdly, the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State's office could not find any evidence of that. They before Rosenblum recused herself, the Secretary of State's office cut a deal to slash the fine down from $35,000 to $15,000 and not request a criminal inquiry. Again, the editorial seems to suggest that the fact that the elections director is Molly Woon, who used to be the deputy director of the Democratic Party of Oregon, didn't recuse herself and may have contacts at the Democratic Party of Oregon since she worked there right before she went to the Secretary of State's office. Who knows if that's true? Seems possible. But overall, I just read this and I went, uh-huh. So let's go back to the last opportunity that we had to hold the one-party state accountable. When was there a recent close election where a candidate of a different party being elected may have brought some accountability? Oh, that's right. Christine Drazan ran against Tina Kotek for the governor's race. And by this time, late in the race, when they make these general election endorsements, Betsy Johnson was already pretty clearly not going to be competitive, all right? Early on, it looked possible. She faded towards the end. I think, we have a two-party system right now. She wasn't able to break out of that, which is too bad because I really like Senator Betsy Johnson. I think she's great. Because Tina Kotek had a, quote, stronger command of the issues and was a very effective speaker, they picked her over Drazen, who is probably one of the best candidates we've run for governor in a long time. Okay. We've had some losers, Bill Sizemore and others, who are not really rock solid, amazing candidates. And then we've run some. Whoa. I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but
I will.
Bryan, you
It's
said
horrible.
it. We've run some Democrats as Republicans, like Newt Bueller. We've run some nice guys like Bud Pierce. We've run some tough guys like Kevin Mannix, right? We've gone pretty much the whole gamut of what's available in the party. And consistently, the Democrat editorial board goes, well, the person with the current part of the party who currently has control and therefore a lot more influence and a lot more information about the government is more trustworthy to run the government. Okay, that's a position you can take, but it drives me crazy during the legislative session when they editorialize against how far these guys are going, when they editorialize in the campaigns about how much crime these guys are doing and just letting each other get away with it. You have the opportunities many times to endorse Republicans for swing seats in the Portland area where they endorse Republicans for statewide office for governor. I think the last one that they legitimately endorsed and who actually won was Dennis Richardson. And that was against like the literal worst Democratic candidate ever, Brad Avakian, who many Democrats didn't even like. They do not take the opportunities in front of them to put a check on the one party state. And it may not matter, Bryan, as you've pointed out. I don't think a lot of people vote based on the Oregonian editorial endorsements. Okay. But even with their limited influence, they won't even exercise it to limit the one party state. And then they're going to editorialize about how bad it is. Yeah. You put us here. You helped put us here. I'm sorry that every Republican candidate isn't exactly what you want, which is basically they only endorsed of recently Newt Bueller. So Newt Bueller is the exact type of Republican they want. You don't get to pick the perfect almost Democrat Republican to run every time because that person can't get enough Republican votes to be competitive. Drazen was more conservative. She was not an unreasonable candidate, but she was where the base was. And that's why she was competitive in a national environment. That's why she was able to raise millions of dollars from out of state, which we need to be competitive because Republicans are not well funded here in the state of Oregon without some help, right? Except for when Mr. Greg Walden gets involved. Thank you, Greg. So they created this problem, then they're going to editorialize about how bad it is. It just makes me absolutely crazy, Bryan. So there, and rant.
Well, I agree with everything you said, especially about the Oregonian. And I think it goes back to even my rant a little bit about that that we can't have perfect Republicans either, right? So the Oregonian wants to have that perfect, like basically moderate, almost Democrat Republican, where some people in the ORP and our Republican Party wants to have these perfect far right Dennis Lithicum Republicans, right? That are all Federalist and it just doesn't work that way. So
no,
politics is messy, but I always go the Democrats, what gives them the edge in this state, I would say in this state is, I always go back to that because it's the way I try to run my campaigns when I do stuff. And I know we've talked about it, but Vince Lombardi, man, he's got some great quotes and his was like, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And so we have to really, like, winning is important and all that sort of stuff, but we have to focus solely on that answer, of winning. And the Democrats do, and they court enough people within, the Oregonian or these other little rags and the Oregonian, they put this editorial out because it's like, well, we got to say something and we can then go back and point to everybody, see how we're nonpartisan and we don't, we don't really just go one side or the other, but it's hardly ever do they actually ever endorse, they wouldn't even speaking of Dennis Lithicum, I don't even think they wouldn't even endorse in the primary. They said he was so bad. Dennis Lithicum was, right? I mean, it was like, holy moly, like they didn't even give the guy a chance because they just hate his brand of Republican politics, which it's not my brand of Republican politics, but Dennis is a smart guy. I like him. I think he's very knowledgeable, and I think he's got, some decent things he adds to. You and I've been in caucus with him. He's got some decent points. He's got some super good history. Boquist has got incredible knowledge about the treasurers and about everything, how state government works and all the things. And
Yep.
you got to listen to the people. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but man.
Because their number one issue was, do you hate Trump enough? Have you supported vote by mail enough? Have you?
Yeah.
It's just and I understand where they're coming from, but it's not reasonable to say you haven't sent us a perfect Republican, therefore we're forced to endorse the Democrat again. Like, seriously? They won't even roll the dice on it. I think that's the silly thing. They won't even say what happens. And you think they probably point to some of the accountability that Kotek has done, but also in the same vein, did we think Drazen wasn't going to do that same accountability? Wasn't going to fire the people at OLCC? It's just it just makes me crazy. So.
I'm pretty positive Drazen would have fired about every director in the agencies that are out there. Hopefully she would have gone all the way down to the studs, as they say, and fired everybody, middle management, the whole nine. Right at this point, you and I would be agency directors, because they'd be or middle management person, because they're looking for people to work in state government. I would hope. I mean, and maybe she didn't do that enough. I think that was also what, if I were to be critical of Drazen's campaign. I mean, I know she said it, but it wasn't like, I'm going to tear this thing down to the studs and rebuild state government for you, the voters that put us. And I think that Tina has done an okay job, but she followed one of the worst Democrat governors in the history of the country. So, I mean, she could have fell over sideways and done a better job than Brown did as governor. And I think that, Kotek needs to do more. Just because she's done a few things, it's not enough. Like, there's a lot more that has to be done in state government. And I like Tina as a person. I've known her now for a while, and I think that she's I'm trying to be a better governor, but it's not easy in this state where it's run by these partisan hacks within the agencies, within this control mechanism. But we elect a governor to go in there and clean house and be the governor for us as the people. And they'll follow you and they'll vote for you, but man, give us something.
And I think her approvals would rise if that were to happen. If she was like, you know what, enough's enough. We've cleaned house of the employment department because everybody's employment and unemployment checks are late. Because that's it, because of a technical upgrade. It makes me crazy. Yes. And I know we went through and it was a lot, but I think it's a little late now for, this person's very knowledgeable about the agency and knows how everything works and is a nice person. Yeah. We're beyond that now.
Hold on, one last thing on Governor Kotek, and I would just give her some free advice. If I was in her office right now, and I know they don't give two shits sometimes about things on the east side, she says she does. We are burning. We are under flames and under siege. Get in your car and get out here. That's how you change hearts and minds, is you get on the ground and you see what the heck is going on. You don't do a flyby. We're going to a fire meeting in Post tonight. We're going to the things that need to be done. Vicky's doing what she can. And I know the governor cares, but I'm just saying you can't care from afar.
Well, and I think her 36 stops, those were all perfectly manicured, protected environments, and they need to put her in environments where she's going to get criticized, because if she doesn't hear the criticism, it's going to be hard for her to do something about it. And if she does, and if she has an answer for it, she's not going to be able to put it out there if she doesn't get criticized. I think that's the hard part. Yep. And it's tough in the world where we are, where we want everybody to get a participation trophy, and even I suffer from that at times. And I just gotta look, Reagan said, I'm 29 years old. It's time to grow up. Sometimes
29.
So. Yeah.
Oh, big 30 coming around the corner.
Yep.
I wasn't even married at 29, and you got 2 kids and stuff. It's crazy.
And another one on the way. I don't know if we put that on the podcast yet, but there's another one coming.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
coming in January. So
great.
Yep.
So happy.
Boy, boy, girl, boy. So
Vicky wouldn't let me have a third, Reagan. She bailed on me after two. So Britt, my youngest, who just came in with a headache from school, he's going to be 17 in October, but Vicky was, I don't want to reveal her age, but basically she told me that there was a certain age where she wasn't going to have any more kids, and I would have had a football team if she would have let me, but we had to stop it too.
it's not easy. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Please rate us. And as I've been saying before, text the episode to a friend that you think doesn't listen to podcasts and would enjoy it. I think that'll help us in terms of subscribership more than even sharing on social media. I'm very anti-social media these days, Bryan. It's good to get information, but I'm really tired of it. So talk to a person, tell them on the phone, write them a written letter about how great our podcast is. We don't care. They can subscribe after they get it in a week. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you soon.